Now the song Rumble is an amazingly simple seeming instrumental guitar song. And that's why I chose it for my 10 minutes for 10 days guitar challenge. If you really wanted to learn the guitar, you have one lying around, you want to find out if you want to pursue the guitar, then doing something like Rumble over some number of days, just so you have one song you can play with that guitar, is a great idea. And that was the driver behind that video. I'll include a link to it in case you haven't seen it. But the whole idea was to take that guitar you have lying around and make something good happen. But once you complete that little exercise, you might just find that the guitar is more interesting than you thought, and maybe, just maybe, you want to learn a little bit more. Now, Link Wray, excellent musician, amazing person for understanding music, wrote a very complicated song and yet made it seem very simple. Now, what do I mean by complicated? Well, when we start delving into a song, we ask ourselves all these embarrassing questions like, what's the key? What's the right scale to pick notes from? Things like that kind of bog us down a little bit in our thinking. And a lot of folks rely on the first chords played, for instance, to name the key. If that was the case, Link Wray's Rumble would be in the key of D. It's not. You might think, well, another note that comes up a lot is the E's, maybe it's in the key of E. Well, not quite right either. And so you can see the problem. Even the starting thing that we'd want to do, picking the key, is complicated. Now the song is simple to play, simple to sort of get a feel around, but it's not so simple to sort of break down into its little bits and pieces. But there's an underscoring sound in Link Wray's Rumble, and that's the 12-bar blues. And so we're going to look first at the 12-bar blues and see if we can figure out relationships that make sense. So the first thing we're going to do with the 12-bar blues is say we're going to do it in the key of E. Okay. And the 12-bar blues is just a major chord song, and so there's going to be the E chord, the A chord, and the B chord. Now, what we understand is that we're in the key of E. The scale we use is then the scale of E, and the notes that are in the scale of E are an E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and then again we're back to E. All right, that's easy enough. Another little rule that gets invoked is when we go for the chords that make up this song, each of the notes we just said are the root notes of the chord. Now, we're not going to get into the major and minor stuff very heavily today, but we're just going to say this. We have the three chords E, A, and B. So just like we did with Rumble, we know the top string is E, we know there's going to be an A, and then there's going to be a B. Okay, those are the notes we're going to use. So the song form is just going to relate around those. Now, the 12-bar blues is really 12 bars of music, which it goes as 4 bars of E, then 2 bars of A, back to 2 bars of E, then a bar of B, then a bar of A, and then 2 bars of E. That's the whole song. We're not going to worry about all the strumming that we would do in a bar. In a bar, there would be 4, say, strums of our chord. We're just going to pretend we can do it with either one strum of a chord or one note, just for the sake of time. So we would have 4 E notes, or 4 E chords, then 2 A notes, or 2 A chords, and then back to 2 E notes, or chords. And then the last line of the music would go B, A, and then 2 E's, sounding something like this. Okay, a little thin, as always when we're just playing one note, so if we make chords, it would be I threw in an extra B just because I was surprised I found the chord. If I would did that more carefully or more correctly, it would be. Okay? And so that's all we really mean by the 12-bar blues. Now, people jazz it up and make it more interesting, but that's the foundational idea. And you notice when we came back to those E's, it sounded done. It sounded finished. We refer to that as the idea of coming home. It's resolved. There's resolution. So that's one of the nice things about knowing we're in the key of E, that when we go to the chord of E, we mostly figure we're going to be back to the starting point and we can go on from there, which is a very useful thing to observe. So our 12-bar blues again. So we can feel that resolution. But we've just snuck in a bunch of words. We now know what we mean by a key. That's all the notes or chords that get along well together. We know the scale, that is that collection of notes that we can harmonize into a scale. We have the word home, which is when we're coming back to our essentially starting point or resolution point, which is really great. Another word that gets thrown in there is the idea of a tonic, and the tonic is just another way of coming back and saying that home position, that position where we find we have resolution. A word that gets confused in this a lot is the word root. Now, when we talk about a root, remember we did for the E major scale, we said that the notes of the E major scale form the chords that we're going to use with that scale. Well, the root is always going to be our lowest note in that particular application. So when we play an E chord, the E note is going to be the root note of that chord. If I play an F, or if I play an A chord, I'll just play it as a bar chord, I'm going to have the A note and the rest of the notes. If I do the B, I have the exact same thing. And so we get the idea that each of these words have particular meanings and we can exploit those to understand what's going on. And this is the power of knowing just a little bit about where we're going and what we're doing. Now, Rumble has the 12-bar blues, you might say, encapsulated a little bit within its structure. And so to understand the song Rumble, we're tempted to say, well, it's going to be in E because we hear the E so often. And in particular, we notice that A major chord and B major chord, they're both side by each in terms of the scale sequence, is present. So it feels like we should be in E. But it's not quite right. And the reason is there is a lot more to music theory than we like to admit. And so if we looked up, for instance, the music experts' view of what key Rumble is in, they'll tell you it's in A. And we might go, wait a minute, A, it hardly makes a presence in what we're doing. Well, it's a little bit of a trick that gets played. Just like you've heard of the major scale and the minor scale is a mode of the major scale. And so this little subtlety is what we're exploiting with respect to the song Rumble, and it gets a particular name, not necessarily minor. There's a bunch of Greek names that are used to describe modes. The key or the song Rumble is actually in E mixolydian, which is the E that we keep thinking we're going to hear, but it's a very particular mode that they've written the song in. And this is what I mean by Link Wray was a really bright songwriter with a lot of real capabilities to be able to exploit and use these things in what's really a very simple sounding song in just an instrumental song. So it's very appealing. Now remember how we did Rumble before. We started with that D note and we just went, okay, we repeat it again. Then we come back to the A. Then back to the E. And then D, B, B. Okay? And so it's a very interesting mapping of the song, especially when we try to make these into chords, because the D to E, very pronounced, very understandable, very easy to appreciate. And when we do the D to A, same thing. But if we looked at the actual writing out of the chords of our E major scale, we would find that the B that we're going to at the very end is not actually a major chord. That is actually a minor chord. It would be a B minor. So if we were to play that chord as it should be, it would sound like this. But instead we play it in a slightly different way. We play it as a B7. Or probably this one. Okay, we can hear that sound of our major in there. The minor B, B minor 7, is that sound. And we're playing it actually here, and it has just a very different sound. So there's a little bit even more to Rumble in terms of switching a minor chord for a major. And then to make it even more interesting, we do know that we have an E major chord in there, but we play the E minor pentatonic. Very interesting sounds that contrast, and they make us think about the way the song was actually written. And so this is what I meant when I said there's so much more to this song that you can puzzle over as time goes by. It's not just the simplest song in the world to play, but it's a fabulous song to start learning, especially if you decide that you like playing the guitar. You've invested your 10 minutes for 10 days, you can now play this song, and now you want to know a little bit more. So Rumble is going to provide you with a lot of insights, especially when you start contrasting it against the 12-bar blues and start seeing the different way the pieces come together. It's a fabulous journey. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm still on it. I'm still entertaining myself to no end, picking out the bits and pieces of clever songwriters' approaches to songs. And I hope you find it just as interesting as I do.